I'd like to start with what Professor Engels said, because on the one hand, I agree with your formulation that a kind of, it echoes Isaiah Berlin, any kind of totalistic worldview ends up bad. So there cannot be this kind of absolutism. But there's on one issue that there's a nuance that it might be formulated differently, because you kept formulating it as us and them and finding a modus vivendi. And what happens, and it's not pie in the sky, and it's not idealism, the sense of the us slowly changes. It's not us as we have always been, but now it's an us where we accept that the way we think of ourselves is going to be different because we have had these inputs of these cultures. And with Jeffrey, it was the opposite of my intention to try and say that this is a simple issue. But Europe will not escape it, because I also agree with your distinction between refugees and migrants. Europe is destined, whether it wants it or not, to have large waves of migration because of the world situation, because 100 years ago, 10 million Europeans left these shores and went to the United States. And there are 10 millions out there who will leave their shores and come to Europe. But also Europe needs it because Europeans have stopped making babies. And this demographic suicide is so dramatic. And the curve of the above 60-year-olds, which more and more need the support of the state, and those who can actually finance it, is so dramatic that we will face in Europe the migration issue. So we need to begin to start thinking about it. And I also, and this echoes Professor Holland and Jeffrey Sachs, if we don't have a respect and a think notion of who we are, we cannot show respect for others. It's very, very significant to me that in establishing European citizenship, the treaties say nationals of the member states are European citizens and subject to the rights and duties herein enumerated, and that's the last time the word duty is mentioned. It's a citizenship without duty, and it's a citizenship without responsibility. So recapturing duty and responsibility in our own civic society is part of the answer of how we can integrate new incomers. And a very short reply to Professor Zamani. We have, the answer here is discernment. We can't have a one coat fits all. So there's a difference between the refugees that you don't ask question because his or her life are out there and you just have to extend a helping hand, and then managed migration, etc. This notion that somebody has to work for 5 years before he or she can get social services, I don't know. My children, I have 5 children, American citizens, they get social services before they've paid in anything to the state. It's an investment in the future. And eventually they will be paying into the state. So I'm a bit skeptical about that kind of notion, but it's complex, how we manage it. But I thought the Abrahamic principle I outlined, I have to be part of you, I will be part of you, you have a right to demand my respect, is important. Su Eminencia, si en nuestras sociedades decidimos de definir algunos valores como fundamentales, es nuestro no solamente derecho, pero un deber de insistir en respetar estos valores. Y podemos hacerlo también vis-à-vis los nuevos ciudadanos que aceptamos. Debemos nosotros también respetar derechos fundamentales, pero si en nuestra sociedad decidimos que la bigamia no es aceptable como costumbre social o la circuncisión femenil no es aceptable, necesitamos, debemos insistir a respetar estos valores, sin miedo, porque esto es la definición de nuestra identidad. I want to say one thing as a comment to the previous discussion. It was interesting. This is not to contest Jeffrey, but is to add one dimension that is so important and consistent with the encyclical of the Pope. So in all your statistics, what was interesting to me and convenient for me, being an Italian citizen and an American citizen, that the United States and Italy were literally twins, both with a high Gini factor, both with a post-distribution high Gini factor, both with a lamentable assistance to foreign countries. There's one big difference between the two. If I look at personal, I quickly Googled, charitable giving in the United States, measured not only in dollars, but in the number of people who give charity. Altruism, really not through the state. So this is another form of subsidiarity. But you yourself, in your parish, in your church, in your synagogue, putting your hand in your pocket and giving money or volunteering one day a week to work. The United States is consistently number 1 in the world. Italy is number 72. And there are two excuses that are often given. But we don't need charitable giving in Europe because we have such a social democracy. That's why I give Italy, because it's a twin of the United States. Gini factor, post-distribution Gini factor, charitable giving, number 72 in the world, the United States number 1. It's important. It's an added dimension to what we're talking about. We can't channel all our recipes for inclusion, for support, through the state. It also has to trickle down to the individual. The other excuse is, but you get such a big tax benefit in the United States when you give. So I say, okay, I give $10,000 a year to charity and it only costs me $6,500 because of the tax break. Why don't you give $6,500? Don't give $10,000 because you don't. No answer to that. I think in these discussions it is important, if you remember John Paul II, the theology of giving, it cannot only be in terms of outcome. It cannot only be I pay taxes and the state does the good deeds. There has to be a dimension of the personal, of the local, of the actual experience of loving thy neighbor like yourself. And it's very hard to achieve if it's only done. Important and critical, and justice becomes before charity, but if it's only done through me paying taxes and the state taking care of the good deeds. I'm afraid I have to stop here. I really have to leave you because I have to beat sunset.